and love, and that's true. But there's just really no way for us to substantiate and make a clear evaluation of whether that's true or not. They make sure that there's no way that we can review their books. And so, I have to say that any worries in that direction are I think, really emotional, and they're really not substantiated. We followed our procurement policy procedure entirely, putting this thing together. So that may not have provided you all kinds of information that you would have liked to have had, but the fact of the matter is it's a procedure that's available online, and it's very clear how we'll react to the ongoings of this kind of possibility. Kirby, I have one question for you, and this is a small town, and this is not an unusual question to ask because we are all here living close together. But where does your son work?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Where does your son work? Where does your son work?
He's a customer service manager at Black Canyon Jet Center.
Thank you. And then one other thing, we do business with the newspaper, and several people in this room do business with the newspaper. But clearly, so does Black Canyon Jet Center. And every weekend we get our newspapers brought to us. Us being the county, and they're delivered in a black plastic bag like this to protect them. And that's greatly appreciated because I can't read wet newspapers. But there's a clear alliance between the two entities, and they have been really less than complimentary. And the reason for doing that is not really clear. But it's really colored things unnecessarily. And that's not the purpose of what we want to do here. Our whole intention in running the airport is to go ahead and provide a first-class operation and do the very best for the community that is possible. And there is no other intent, indeed. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I tell you about my first experience
Sure.
in Montrose?
Sure. I mean, this is still a public hearing, and we're having this dialogue, and you have an opportunity.
My first visit was in the ski season of 1997. I was acting as a hawker captain in the Chicago area. I was fortunate enough to pick up Mr. Bill Ford of Ford Motor Company and his family and the German Shepherd in Detroit, and then flew to Montrose. I bought fuel in Chicago. I bought fuel in Detroit. I bought fuel in Montrose. Repositioned the aircraft to San Diego for a few more trips, picked up Mr. Ford and his family at the end of their vacation, and brought them back to Detroit. The tentacles are far and wide. As you know, we're a Florida operation. The Miami Area Ski Club is one of the largest in the nation. I don't know their member count, but it's huge. That's our client base. We'll bring them here. We want to bring them here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ellis.
Okay, this is obviously a very charged situation. I understand it's not what you would call a routine situation, a normal contract or agreement that the county has entered into. There's a lot at stake here for everybody involved, and I understand it. We really wanted, and my hope was that we would have a very public process on this as well. But let me make a comment, Kirby, kind of an answer to you. You said you see nothing in the grant assurances that compels us to make a decision in this arena. But let me tell you what I did do in part of my due diligence. I did contact the compliance office of the FAA in Washington, D.C. I talked to an individual named Kevin Willis who identified himself as head of compliance, and I posed the question. And I didn't lead the question, I just posed a question. I said, under what circumstances can a federally obligated airport deny a request for a second FBO operation? And he echoed precisely what Dan Reamer said. I know you think there's some kind of a, maybe a connectivity between Dan representing the county and his comments, but this was directly with the FAA in Washington, D.C. They had no dog in this fight, so to speak. And he did give exactly the conditions that the FAA would accept as reasonable for denial, and only those conditions that have been stipulated and spoken to here today. There are consequences if you go through the circular, if you go through the order, to stipulate what can happen if an airport denies an opportunity in violation of grant assurances. That is foremost on my mind. I have no desire to injure Black Canyon. They provided, from my perspective, quality service, but the market demand and those sort of things really are not, from the FAA's perspective, and we're under that obligation. Once we took grant dollars years ago, we subjected ourselves to federal statutory regulations as well as FAA circulars and requirements. And that's how I'm looking at this. For me personally, with my background, to willingly, because I've heard the comment made, gee, you don't have to do this. You can say no, and dang the consequences, full steam ahead. But I'm looking at it more as of an ethical perspective from my part personally about a willingness to really enter into what would be, if there's a federal statutory requirement that we don't do something, or we do it and don't do it, or whatever, that to me, to go against that when we put ourselves under those obligations by accepting those dollars and entering into it, then to me it'd almost be a form of civil disobedience on my part. I always took an oath years ago to uphold and defend, to enforce the laws of the United States government, the state of Colorado, the city and county of Denver. So I'm looking at this as a moral issue and an ethical issue. I'm certainly not in this to, Kirby, I know, and you don't agree, and that's okay. But you're not me. You didn't raise your hand in the oath and swear. And I take that very personally and very seriously. And some of the comments about ethics and integrity here, I value very highly. I've entered this with an open mind. I did my own due diligence. I called the FAA, who Kirby, I think, is probably a little more in tune to what they require of us than one of our opinions. So one thing I'm saying is, short of making sure that, did we fail on the public process? I don't know. Maybe there has been some failures, and I would take some responsibility for that as well, I guess. But my question would be, if I personally supported maybe a 2-week continuance, to what end would that serve? Would anything be introduced that would make this a different outcome as far as what the FAA requires for us as a sponsor of this airport? Oh, Blake's hands up, I see it. As a sponsor of this airport, I don't know. So that's kind of my dilemma. I'm sitting here rationalizing this through my mind, and this is only me speaking for me. So anyway, that's kind of my comment for the moment.
May I say one thing?
Yeah, Mr. Klein, could you come to the mic, please? You can say something, but please come forward to the microphone.
Mr. Henderson, you asked me a question about my son. I see motive in that. My son and his staff are highly credible in the aviation industry. He has worldwide experience. He has the interest of Montrose County and the city of Montrose on his front page. He has done a creditable job for Montrose. I am not in the picture at all. He stands by himself. He does what he does by himself. I am rarely at the airport, but he does work there. And Montrose and the community of this area can thank him, including those in Telluride, for many of the things that are done at that airport. I think that the airport manager recognizes that, and it's up to you. The Board of County Commissioners should recognize that. He was very, very heavily involved in this crash out here at Ridgeway Airport, accommodating the people who suffered the loss. This takes expertise. This takes the type of people who understand with compassion and work with compassion. He does that. I am very proud of that young man, and he deserves credit all the way down. And that speaks for the FBO itself. My interest in that FBO is purely the existence of an enterprise that serves this county well, and I fear that they will be placed in jeopardy, and any new entity would enter into the same jeopardy from an economic standpoint. It's a heavy, heavy investment, and they make that investment voluntarily. They do it under the privilege of the county, and it is important that those people have a right to success. The FAA does not approve, in my knowledge, they do not approve of any enterprise or any sponsor entering into agreements that jeopardize the livelihood of individuals or businesses. Thank you.
Not so much a question, but I think an answer to Gary. I think that by putting a 2-week continuance on this, or a month continuance, will help some of the people understand better what you're doing. It'll also help get possibly some of the people that are looking at the contract wording and maybe the knowledge of what was spent for Black Canyon and what was spent just basically so that an FBO at all could operate on the field, and how much that really is being credited towards Black Canyon, possibly wrongly. Things like the fuel farm, if you really come down to it, it was built for the county to be able to operate. That Black Canyon was able to lease it was just that they were the FBO that was here at the time. So therefore, the cost of it isn't really something that should be attributed to for Black Canyon. Same way when you look at the whole ramp, it wasn't built for Black Canyon. It was built for the FBO to operate, and it was originally the Montrose County FBO. I think that I understand the grant assurances probably as well as you do. There is no requirement that you put dollars into it, as I said before. And with that, I think at least having people understand what's in the contracts and all would be better for the county.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, to address one of Gary's points is the ability to yield some results from a 2-week or a 30-day delay. One of them would be you picking up the option that Judy Kahn offered, which was to bring a representative chosen by Kevin Egan to talk about the legal issues. And I think that the general public would be very well served by listening to that and being able to engage, as we have today, Dan Reamer, in a dialogue about his perspective on this subject. We need time to do that. Kevin or Judy Kahn would need to be able to schedule that, and we could do that perhaps at a regularly scheduled Board of County Commissioners meeting if that's convenient. But I do think that you should take up the offer and bring that person or those people in here to be able to have that dialogue.